And as we said, the floor and the checkerboard, one application that we do see, because remember what hides behind the doors of secret fraternities we're not usually privy to, but I will draw your attention to the fact that police officers throughout the Western world have the checkerboard on their hats. And you will see the symbol, and many of the other symbols that are worn by the police and by the Navy and by the Army are actually symbols from Freemasonry. They're just showing you that they officiate for Freemasonry. In fact, in this country, your police cars are even black and white. And we don't have time to go into the entire symbolism connected to that, of course. But there are people like Jordan Maxwell who specialize in this. And the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry are actually called the blue degrees. And that is one of the reasons why the United Nations, some of the costumes and uniforms that police and Navy and nurses and so on wear in society are that color. There's a special kind of color. And what I'd like to point out also, of course, is the fact that the ground plan of many of the cities of the Western world, you see, are actually based on sacred geometry, occult, metaphysical geometry, and astrology. And in fact, in America, this is a layout of Washington, D.C., it turns out that Washington, D.C. has 22 zodiacs incorporated into the architecture of the city. This is more than any other place in the world. Even in London, there's only 4, friezes or zodiacs. In one city alone in America, of course, lots of cities have pyramids and obelisks and sphinxes and what have you, but Washington is based on occult geometry, and it has 22 zodiacs within the layout of the city itself.
That's a square and compass from Freemasonry on the side there.
Yeah, this is a view of Freemasonry, and some scholars have gone into this with great depth. One of them is a man who recently wrote a book on this. This kind of research has gone back many hundreds of years, but for convenience sake, a man has written an absolutely magnificent tome, and his name is David Obeson. He wrote a book called The Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital. And this book, you see, lends credibility to what people like myself have been saying for decades. And in this book, he goes to the memoirs, to the journals, to the letters between the founding fathers and the architects and the statesmen of this country, and proves that they were interested in these topics, these occult premises. And here again, and even the namings of certain places, like Shooter's Hill and Alexandria, these are places in Washington, D.C., the layout of the streets and so on. In fact, the chief Masonic hall in Washington, D.C., and some people say throughout America, is actually on a hill in Washington called Shooter's Hill. Now, this innocuous name would be passed by a lot of people until we realize that the word shooters is a euphemism for the sign of Sagittarius. And many things, as I said, government buildings within Washington, D.C., like the 7 main buildings, are aligned with constellations. Many cities of the Western world are. And specifically, the Masonic Hall is aligned with the constellation of Sagittarius, and even the name of the hill it's sitting on is a veiled, cryptic euphemism for Shooter's Hill, because the sign of Sagittarius has been known as the archer or the shooter. And Sagittarius is an extremely important sign of the zodiac. And what I'm talking about here is not your regular, a natal newspaper type of astrology. This is occult astrology. And Sagittarius is extremely important. And the archer, his arrow is actually facing the very center of our galaxy. The reason why he has a bow and arrow is because the arrow is facing a certain target. Well, what target? Constellation of Sagittarius is where the center of our galaxy is. So our whole solar system is spiraling towards a place very close to the sign of Sagittarius. But more importantly, if you look at this photograph, in the top right-hand corner, there's another gigantic constellation, even bigger than Sagittarius. And this constellation is massive, and it straddles the signs of Scorpio and Sagittarius. And no astrologer, very few astrologers ever draw attention to this. But in occultism is a very, very important constellation, and it's called Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer, and it is known as the 13th sign of the zodiac. And this 13th sign is of extreme importance in occult and Freemasonic ritual. And many of the things that we see, like the design of courtrooms, for instance, other anecdotes connected to the number 13, many assassinations, believe it or not. For instance, I can give you one example, is President Kennedy's assassination was on November 22nd. This happens to occupy, in calendrical and astrological calendar, the sign of the 13th sign of the zodiac. This is why we have the magistrate in a court being the 13th juror You have 12 lesser jurors and the 13th sign, the 13th person. And you go into a precinct, you see, which is outside the normal laws of causality. You are now in what they call the area of the black sun, out of the normal passing of time and space and into the place of judgment where you're going to be judged. And Sagittarius as a sign, astrologers will know, is very connected to the concept of justice and judgment and civic authority, you see. So lots and lots of symbolism connected there. In Freemasonry we have the symbol of the pentagon, or the pentacle. That's a star, and this of course the symbol of the star you find on corporate logos just all over the place. Later on we'll get into that. And the colors of the 5 elements. The number 5, it has a lot of occult properties, and it has really nothing to do with black magic like a lot of people think. But we do find that again turning up in very familiar areas, like the police badge, you see, and so on. And in fact, when you do get arrested, you're brought in and they say that you broke the law. The very term breaking the law goes back to the Mosaic or Talmudic law and breaking the law. And many sheriff's badges and all are 6-sided, just like the Star of David, which people of the Hebrew persuasion will recognize, but that is not a Hebrew symbol. That is a symbol going back to the Aryan cults of India. It's a symbol that predates Western understanding. And originally was a symbol of the sun, and then the Semites picked it up and made it a symbol of the planet Saturn. But we're still seeing occult symbolism in very obvious places in the world. Here is a Medal of Honor that is given to nobility and given to people of merit, and again the symbol of the eagle and the pentacle.
It says it's the Medal of Honor, so this is a positive thing, but the
Right.
pentagram is upside down. Does that mean anything?
No, actually this is erroneous. Christians point to the fact that the inverted pentacle is negative, or the number 666 is negative, black cats are evil, the number 13 is evil, and so on. Basically, in my studies I realized that, you see, our inheritance is the great ancient symbolisms coming out of the past. And when we're working with that kind of symbolism, we're enriched and empowered. But when Christianity and the Orthodox religions came along, they had to demonize all of this stuff to remove us from our central power so that they could then assume control. Let me make it absolutely fundamentally clear to answer that very good question that you just asked, and that is that no symbol in itself is negative. No number, no color, no symbol is in itself a negative, has any negative meaning. It is who is using it and for what for that makes it negative.
And the what for might change with time.
And of course it does, depending on your agenda. But no symbol, I don't care if it's a reverse crucifix or an upside down pentacle, no symbol in itself has negative properties. So on, you know, but it's who's using it and for what for is the answer to that. Here is a group called the Shriners that are well established in America, again, using Egyptian symbolism, you see. And the American flag is an occult symbol. It has stars on it. People look at this every day and never think about the symbolism that went into the colors or the choice, or why there are 4 short stripes of red and 3 long stripes, how the number 13 and the number 51 appear so often on the star, you see. And here's an even better example, is the California flag, which always shows the grizzly and the star. And just like the communist flag, you have the red star, and there's not 1 in a million people can tell you why the symbol of the bear is on the California flag. Most people will say, oh, well, that's the indigenous animal of such and such. And that is not the case. Again, the answer is to be found in astrology, because the bear with the star above it relates to Ursa Major, the bear that's floating up there. Yes, the 7 stars of Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, and the red star is, of course, the pole star, Polaris. That is the real symbolism behind the California flag. It is an occult symbol with astrological information. And from that wonderful book, Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital, is a wonderful statement here. And I think that the implications of what he says here are absolutely incredible. When found in a text, the star determined or indicated to a reader that the group of hieroglyphs associated with it was related to spiritual matters. It was related to the heavens, to invisible energies, which the Greeks called etheric. Now, as I say, what he's saying here is amazing, because the symbol of the star is found on the clothes of generals. It is found on the hellish machines of war. It is found in the designs of cities, and it is on flags, absolutely countless thousands of flags. And this person is pointing out why you find it on these symbols. Talking about astrology, here's another very famous symbol of the lion and the unicorn, which is seen on heraldry and flags and insignias and even products all over the place. How many people realize that this is to do with the royal houses When the sun ascends to its most northerly position in the zodiac, it's in the houses of Cancer and Leo. Well, that's what the heraldry is showing. The symbol of the red lion is the symbol of Leo, and the pale white unicorn represented the moon, and the moon relates to the house of Cancer. Now, people who are Cancers by birth sign think that their symbol is the crab. That is a very modern adaptation. The original symbol of Cancer was the scarabus beetle, the Egyptian scarabus beetle, which later gets corrupted into the crab. Or, even more as a purist, it's the white pale unicorn. So that is what you're looking at when you see the symbol on royalty. It's actually an astrological symbol. And in fact, many cities are designed on the circle of the zodiac. Here's St. Peter's, where you have an enormous amount of symbolism having to do with the stellar positions of heavens. You find in the clock towers, for instance, there's always a clock tower, you know, and usually the face of the clock is so high up. I mean, what purpose could it? Nobody can see it to tell the time, so why do you have it? Well, the big bends of the world and these clocks are to indicate that sidereal time is becoming terrestrialized. It's the transmittance of heavenly time into earthly time. And then even when they don't have a clock, they'll have a place called Times Square. Or Thames River, the river Thames. All goes back to the same principle. Here is the geometry of a circle that represented the zodiac. So whenever you see any of these columns and obelisks, just realize that they're placed on geomantic power points to enhance energy. They're not just commemoration stones. They're markers that are often aligned with the mountains and the surrounding topography, or aligned with the heavens. And you find them all over the world, not just in Egypt, but in the modern cities, even in Paris. We have the famous Eiffel Tower, you see. And these stately homes and these stately buildings, it requires an awful lot of geometry to build them, coming out of the ancient world.
Some of them may have been moved to their present position from a sacred position before.
Or even built on top of more primitive Celtic sites. Not so much in America, but in England you'll find that the location was at one point a very sacred druidic or site for other religions. But absolutely make no doubt about it, the thinking and the thought that went into this and the designs all have a meaning. And then when you look at it, because it's in our space, when you look at it or when you go there, it's having a registering effect on your consciousness. And that effect can be very positive, or it can be also very negative, attributing to many pernicious vices that we have. And it's very interesting, too, the connection with Egypt. Their most sacred star was the star Sirius. Because why was it sacred? Is because their year opened with Sirius. When Sirius rose in July in the sign of Virgo Leo at that time, then the Egyptians had what they called the opening of the year. But the hieroglyphic for the planet Sirius, meaning when they wanted to write the symbol of Sirius, they used a pentagram, an obelisk, and an oval. Those were the symbols of the planet Sirius in Egypt. Now, isn't it interesting that in Washington, D.C., we have exactly that, but not as a hieroglyphic, but actually carved in stone in the city of Washington. We have a pentagon. People have always wondered why on earth was that shape ever created in the first place. Well, now we have the answer. Not far away, we have the Washington Monument, which is the obelisk. And then we have a place called the Oval Office. Those three structures actually, in stone, on the topography of America, are actually a hieroglyph for the star Sirius. So one might ask, what is actually going on here?
Serious business.
Serious business, yeah. Now here we have another wonderful statement from that book. It says, the extraordinary truth is that the very existence of the Washington Monument is intimately linked with the Egyptian star Sirius, that the ancients represented in their sacred hieroglyphics as an obelisk as well as a star. How is it possible that this most important star of the ancient world should find itself, as it were, resurrected in the architecture of the United States? And this one we have, it says, in the course of that day, when the cornerstone of the Washington Monument was laid, the sun would have actually passed over Sirius. So not only was this the architects involved in commemorating the star Sirius, but we find that even with the laying of the cornerstone of Washington Monument, the sun was literally passing over the star Sirius. How come we didn't learn that in the history books?